Hey, my name is Tyler Brennan. I'm 30 years old, and for the last 6 years, I've been a firefighter with the Boston Fire Department. I work out of the station in East Boston, the kind of place where the air always smells like diesel and old coffee, and the nights are either dead quiet or screaming with sirens. I live alone in a small apartment above a corner store. It's nothing special, just a bedroom, a kitchen that barely fits a table for two, and a window that looks out over the rooftops toward the harbor. Most nights I come home smelling like smoke, peel off my gear, and sit in the dark until the silence feels normal again. 2 years and 4 months ago, my wife Jennifer died. It happened on a Tuesday. I was at the station when the call came in. Boston Memorial. Come now. I drove like the city was on fire. When I got there, the doctor met me in the hallway. He didn't have to say anything. I already knew from the way he looked at me. She'd been at work, felt chest pain, and by the time the ambulance reached the ER, it was already too late. Sudden cardiac arrest, no warning, no chance to say goodbye. I stood outside the room for a long time after they let me see her. I don't remember much else from that night except the sound of my own breathing and the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Since then, I've kept moving, shifts, overtime, the occasional beer with the guys at the station. I don't date. I don't go out much. I just do the job and come home. It's easier that way. So when Captain Rodriguez told me on December 19th that I had to attend the Firefighter Foundation Gala at the Boston Harbor Hotel, I tried to get out of it. "Tyler, it's one night," he said, standing in the apparatus bay with his arms crossed. "Dress uniform. Show up, eat dinner, shake a few hands, go home. The department needs to be represented. You're going." I didn't have a good reason to say no, so I said yes. The hotel was too bright and too warm. Chandeliers, polished floors, men in suits that cost more than my monthly rent. I felt stiff in my dress blues like I was wearing someone else's skin. I found table 8, sat down, and stared at the centerpiece like it had personally offended me. I just wanted to get through the meal and leave. 15 minutes later, a woman in a deep blue dress walked toward the table. She looked about my age, maybe a couple years older. Brown hair pulled back low, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She stopped in front of me, hesitated, then spoke. "Tyler, hi, I'm Kara Mitchell. It's nice to meet you." I stood up out of habit and shook her hand. "Sorry, do we know each other?" Her smile faltered. "You're Tyler Brennan, right? Table 8? I glanced down. 2 place cards sat side by side, mine and hers. Before I could answer, a woman from the event staff appeared, smiling too wide. "Wonderful. You found each other. Enjoy your evening." She disappeared before either of us could ask what the hell was going on. Kara sat down slowly. I did the same. For a long moment, we just looked at each other across the white tablecloth and flickering candles. Finally, she spoke, voice low. "I should be honest. My boss told me this was a blind date, a setup. You didn't know?" I rubbed a hand over my face and laughed once, short and dry. "My captain said it was a work gala. I had no idea I was being set up." Her cheeks flushed. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. This is ridiculous." I looked around the ballroom. The first course was already being served. Music played softly. People laughed at other tables like nothing strange was happening. I understood then that both of us had been pushed into this without being asked. "It's not your fault," I said. Looks like we were both lied to. Kara let out a small breath of a laugh. It eased something in the air between us. I nodded toward the plates. "We might as well eat. Talk like normal people. Then we can agree that our bosses need a lesson in boundaries." This time her laugh was real. The conversation started stiff but loosened as the meal went on. Kara told me she was an ER nurse at Boston Memorial. When she said the name of the hospital, something in my chest tightened, but I only nodded and asked what the shifts were like. She said they were long and that some nights she ate dinner at 3 in the morning standing up. I told her about the station, about the time we spent 40 minutes rescuing a cat from a vent only for the cat to act like we'd personally insulted it. She laughed into her napkin, and for the first time in a long while I heard myself laugh too. Then the lights dimmed for the memorial portion of the evening. A man from the foundation stood and spoke about firefighters who had died in the line of duty. Photos appeared on the big screen behind him. I'd seen presentations like this before. I knew how they went. I kept my eyes on my water glass. Beside me, Kara went very still. I turned. She was staring at the screen, one hand gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles had gone white. On the screen was a young firefighter in dress uniform smiling wide at the camera. Kara whispered, almost too quiet to hear, "That's Ben, my fiancé." I didn't know what to say. She kept going, voice shaking. "He died 4 years ago, a fire in Dorchester." I reached over without thinking and covered her hand with mine. "I'm sorry, Kara." She looked at me then, eyes glassy. I spoke before I could stop myself. "I lost my wife 2 years ago. Not the same way. But I know what it's like when everyone thinks enough time has passed and you're still stuck on that day." Her fingers tightened around mine for a second. We stayed like that through the rest of the speeches, two strangers holding hands in a room full of people, both of us carrying ghosts we hadn't planned on showing anyone tonight. When the gala ended, we walked out to the lobby together. Kara pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. "Thank you for not running away from the setup," she said. "Thank you for not running either." I pulled one of the station cards from my wallet and handed it to her. "If you ever want coffee without any bosses plotting behind our backs, that's my number." She took out her phone right there and texted me. My phone buzzed in my pocket a second later. "Now you have mine too," she said. I drove home through the cold Boston streets with the heater on low and the radio off. For the first time in a long time, the apartment didn't feel quite as empty when I stepped inside. I stood in the dark kitchen for a while, staring at nothing, turning the night over in my head. I didn't know then that the name Kara Mitchell would drag me straight back into the worst day of my life. But something had shifted, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone in it. 3 days after the gala, I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand for 20 minutes before I typed the message. "This weekend. Coffee? No gala, no setups, no dress uniform." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over send. Part of me hoped she wouldn't answer. Another part, the part that had been quiet for a long time, hoped she would. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. She replied 20 minutes later. "I'd like that." We met at a small cafe in Cambridge on a Saturday afternoon when the sky was the color of old concrete and the wind cut straight through your coat. Kara showed up in a gray sweater that looked like it had been washed 100 times and jeans that were frayed at the hems. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She looked younger without the dress and the careful makeup. Softer. Real. I was already at a table by the window when she walked in. She spotted me, gave a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes yet, and slid into the seat across from me. "Hi," she said. "Hi." For the first minute, neither of us knew what to do with our hands. Then I made a joke about how at least this time nobody was going to announce we were on a blind date in front of 200 people. And she laughed. Quiet, but real. After that, the stiffness started to crack. She told me about her apartment in Somerville, the radiator that knocked like it was trying to communicate in Morse code every night around 2 a.m. The protein bars she kept in her locker because sometimes the only break she got during a 12-hour shift was long enough to chew and swallow standing up. I told her about the station cat incident in more detail than I had at the gala. How the damn thing had clawed one of the newer guys across the forearm and then sat in the engine like it owned the place. She laughed harder at that, covering her mouth with one hand like she was embarrassed by the sound. I liked the sound. I wanted to hear it again. We didn't call it a date that day. We just sat there until the light outside changed and the cafe started to empty. When we walked out, the wind had picked up. She pulled her sleeves down over her hands and we stood on the sidewalk for a minute, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. After that first coffee, we kept finding reasons to see each other. Some evenings we walked along the Charles River when the wind was cold enough to make our eyes water. Other nights we ate at a tiny Thai place in Alston, where the owner knew Kara's order by heart and always brought her an extra spring roll without asking. A few times, after I got off a long shift, she met me at the truck and we sat in the cab with the heater running, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, talking about nothing that mattered and everything that did. We were careful with each other. Both of us had lost someone. Both of us carried the knowledge that the ground could open up under your feet without warning. So we moved slowly. No labels, no big declarations. Just time. Just the steady accumulation of small things. One night after the Thai place, we walked back to her building. The hallway was cold. She stopped at her door and turned to face me. For a second, I thought she was going to say goodnight and go inside. Instead, she looked down at her hands, then up at me. "Tyler," she said quietly, "do you ever feel guilty when you start to feel happy again?" The question hit something low in my chest. I didn't have to think about the answer. "Yeah," I said, "more than I want to admit. What do you do with it?" I looked at the scuffed floor between us. Used to punish myself by living like a ghost. Lately, I've been trying to believe Jennifer wouldn't want that for me. Kara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, but steady. "Ben wouldn't want it for me either." We looked at each other in that cold hallway. Something fragile passed between us. Not fireworks, just the recognition that we were both tired of being alone with the weight we carried. She kissed me first. It was barely anything, just the lightest press of her mouth against mine, trembling, like she was asking permission and apologizing at the same time. I didn't move at first, then I kissed her back, slow, careful, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her hands stayed at her sides. Mine stayed loose at mine. When we broke apart, she kept her eyes closed for a second longer than necessary. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For kissing me?" She shook her head, gave a small, sad laugh. "For still being scared?" "I'm scared too," I said. After that night, we stopped pretending we were just two people who had survived a bad setup. We saw each other more often. She started texting me pictures of terrible hospital coffee. I started sending her photos of whatever ridiculous thing the guys at the station had done that day. But there were still moments when something shifted in her. We'd be talking, laughing, and then I'd mention Jennifer or the hospital, and her face would go still for half a second too long. She'd recover quickly, change the subject, smile like nothing had happened. I noticed. I didn't push. One evening, after we'd been sitting in my truck for almost an hour, I asked her straight, "Is there something you want to tell me?" She looked at me for a long time. The streetlight outside caught the side of her face. "Maybe," she said. "I just don't know how yet." "When you do," I told her, "I'll be here." She nodded, but her eyes stayed sad in a way that made my chest tight. I didn't know what she was carrying. I only knew that whatever it was heavy enough that she kept checking the weight of it every time she looked at me. And I knew that I was starting to care enough that I wanted her to put it down. Even if I wasn't sure yet what would happen when she did. Early February hit Boston hard. The wind off the harbor felt like it had teeth. I was coming off a 48-hour stretch at the station when I realized something that scared the hell out of me. I didn't just like having Kara around. I wanted her in my life in a way that went deeper than coffee and careful conversations. That thought kept me awake more than the caffeine ever did. After Jennifer, I had told myself my heart was done. Closed up, locked, keys thrown away. But Kara hadn't forced the door. She had just sat outside it, patient, not pushing, until one day I noticed I was the one turning the handle. The idea that I could lose her the same way I lost Jennifer made my chest feel tight in a way I hadn't felt in years. I started telling her more. One night we were walking along the river path near the Science Museum. The lights from the buildings across the water reflected in the dark water like they were trying to reach something they couldn't touch. I don't know why I chose that night to say it out loud, but the words came before I could stop them, The day Jennifer died, I was at the station. Got the call, drove to Boston Memorial like the roads were on fire. When I got there, the doctor was already waiting in the hallway. I knew before he opened his mouth. Kara stopped walking. I felt it more than saw it. The sudden stillness beside me. I kept going, slower now. I used to think if I had gotten there sooner, or noticed something earlier, or stayed home that day instead of taking the shift, maybe it would have been different. She turned to face me. Her voice came out tighter than usual. "It wasn't your fault." The way she said it wasn't soft reassurance. It was almost urgent, like she needed me to believe it as much as she needed to say it. I looked at her. Her eyes were too bright under the streetlights. "You sound pretty sure," I said. She swallowed. "Some things you can't change no matter what you do." We stood there with the wind cutting between us. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but something in her face told me she wasn't ready to explain. So I let it go. We kept walking, but the air between us felt heavier after that. That was the night things started to shift. At first it was small. Texts took longer to come back. She canceled one dinner because her shift got extended. Then another because she said she was too tired. I understood. ER nurses don't get to pick their hours. I told myself it was just work, that she needed space the same way I sometimes needed it after a bad call. But 2 weeks passed and the distance kept growing. When we did talk, she sounded careful, like she was measuring every word before she let it out. I hated how familiar that felt. One night after a long shift, I drove straight to her building in Somerville instead of going home. I didn't text first. I knew it was pushy, but the not knowing was starting to eat at me. She opened the door in an oversized hoodie, hair pulled back messy, dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. I didn't bother with small talk. "Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head fast. "No, Tyler, it's not you." "Then what is it? Because you're pulling away and I can feel it." She crossed her arms over her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. "There are some things happening at the hospital. I don't want to drag you into it." I studied her face. I could have pushed harder. Part of me wanted to, but I also remembered what it felt like when people tried to dig into my grief before I was ready to let them. "If you need space, I'll give it to you," I said. "But don't disappear on me without saying why." Her eyes filled. She looked down at the floor. "I don't want to hurt you." "You are hurting me," I said quietly, "by not telling me what's going on." She didn't answer, just stood there with her arms wrapped around herself while the hallway light flickered once overhead. I wanted to pull her in. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to understand. All at once. I went home that night with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. A few days later, I did something I had avoided for more than 2 years. I called Boston Memorial and requested the complete medical file for Jennifer Brennan. I told myself it was time to close the loop. I had lived too long with the what-ifs running on a loop in my head. If I was going to try to build something real with Kara, I needed to look straight at the day I lost Jennifer instead of just carrying the broken pieces of it. I needed facts on paper, not just the version my memory kept rewriting at 3 in the morning. While I waited for the records to come, Kara stayed distant. I didn't push. I just sent one message. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." She answered 2 hours later. "I know, and I'm sorry." I read those 4 words more times than I should have. There was something final in them that I didn't like. Something that sounded like she was already preparing for me to walk away. I didn't know yet what she was sorry for, but I was starting to understand that whatever it was big enough to make her choose silence over the chance we'd been building. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending I didn't feel the space widening between us. The envelope from Boston Memorial arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at the station. I signed for it without thinking, tucked it under my arm like it was just another piece of mail, and drove home with the heater blowing lukewarm air against my hands. I set it on the kitchen table and left it there. All evening I moved around it, made dinner I didn't eat, washed dishes that didn't need washing. The brown paper looked ordinary, but every time I passed the table I felt it pulling at the edge of my vision. Close to midnight I finally sat down, turned on the small lamp and opened it. The first pages were clinical: time of arrival, initial presentation, vital signs that told a story I already knew by heart. I read slowly, stopping when the words blurred. Jennifer had been in full arrest when the ambulance reached the ER. The team had worked on her immediately. I kept turning pages. Then I reached the section that listed the responding trauma team. Primary trauma nurse, Kara Mitchell. I read the line 3 times before the name registered. My hand went still on the paper. The fridge hummed in the quiet kitchen, suddenly too loud. I pulled the page closer to the light, as if better lighting would change what was printed there. It didn't. I sat back in the chair and stared at nothing. My mind started moving backward through every conversation we'd had since the gala. Every time she had gone quiet when I mentioned the hospital. Every time her smile had faltered when Jennifer's name came up. The way she had reacted the night I told her about driving to Boston Memorial like a man on fire. The urgent way she had said it wasn't my fault. She had known. Not from the beginning, maybe, but at some point after that first night, she had put the pieces together, and she had chosen to say nothing. I don't remember deciding to go to her apartment. One minute I was sitting at the table with the papers spread out, the next I was in the truck, driving across the bridge into Somerville with the heater on full. The streets were mostly empty. Snow from the last storm still sat in dirty piles along the curbs. She opened the door before I even knocked twice. One look at my face and she knew. The color drained out of her skin. She stepped back without a word and let me inside. I stood in the middle of her small living room. She closed the door behind her with both hands like she needed something to hold on to. "From when?" I asked. My voice came out calmer than I expected. She swallowed. "The morning after the gala." I nodded once, like that made any kind of sense. "So almost 2 months. Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall yet. "I know, I was wrong." I kept my hands at my sides. "You looked me up in the system." She nodded. "When you said your full name at the end of the night, it sounded familiar. The next morning I checked the records. I saw Jennifer's name. I saw yours. And I saw my own name on the chart." My jaw tightened. "And you decided not to tell me." "I was scared," she said, voice breaking. "I remembered that night. I remembered working on her. I remembered you standing in the hallway afterward. I thought if you knew I was the one who was there, you would only ever see me as the nurse who couldn't bring your wife back. You didn't get to decide that for me." "I know." The tears started then, sliding down her face. "I know that now. But the longer I waited, the harder it got. Because for the first time in years, I wanted something again. I wanted you. And I hated myself for it." I turned away from her, needing a second to breathe. The room felt too small. "I told you about Jennifer. I told you about the day she died. The whole time you already knew you had been in that room." "Yes. You let me believe there was nothing that big between us." She didn't try to defend herself, just stood there crying quietly, arms wrapped around her middle like she was trying to keep from falling apart. I looked back at her. "I don't know if you had any fault in what happened to Jennifer, but I know you had fault with me." The words landed like I had hit her. She made a small, broken sound and covered her mouth with one hand. I didn't stay to watch what came after. I walked past her to the door. "Tyler," she said, barely above a whisper. I stopped with my hand on the knob but didn't turn around. "I need time," I said. "I can't do this right now." Then I left. The next 10 days were the longest I had lived through since Jennifer died. I was angry at Kara for lying by omission. I missed her in a way that made it hard to sleep. I read the medical file again and again. The first few times I only saw her name. After the anger started to settle, I read the actual notes. Jennifer had arrived in a state that left almost no room for survival. The team had done everything: CPR, defibrillation, medications, the full protocol. The attending physician's summary was clear: catastrophic cardiac event with minimal chance of meaningful recovery despite immediate and appropriate intervention. Kara hadn't failed Jennifer. She had fought for her in a room I couldn't enter. That knowledge didn't erase what she had hidden from me, but it made the picture bigger than just my hurt. One night at the station, Captain Rodriguez found me sitting alone in the day room with the file open on the table. I ended up telling him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long minute. "She was wrong to keep it from you," he said finally. "I know, but she didn't kill your wife." I closed my eyes. "I know that too." "So the real question is whether you can forgive her for the silence. Not today, but maybe someday." The question stayed with me through the rest of the shift and all the way home. On the 10th day, I picked up my phone and called her. She answered on the first ring. "Tyler?" Her voice sounded hoarse, like she hadn't used it much lately. "I need to say some things," I told her. "Can you meet me tomorrow?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Where?" "There's a cafe in the South End. The one with the green awning. 1 o'clock. I'll be there. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time staring at the floor. I still didn't know exactly what I was going to say to her. I only knew that I had the truth now, every piece of it, and I couldn't keep carrying it alone. I got to the cafe in the South End 15 minutes early. I chose the corner table where the light was softer and the noise from the street felt farther away. I didn't want to do this in a rush or with an audience. I just wanted enough quiet to say what needed saying. Kara walked in at 1 o'clock exactly. No makeup, eyes swollen from nights that clearly hadn't held much sleep, hair pulled back low the way she wore it when she was too tired to care. She looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally set it down only to realize her arms still remembered the weight. She slid into the seat across from me and wrapped both hands around the coffee I had already ordered for her. I spoke first. "I forgive you for Jennifer," I said. "Not because you need forgiving for that part. You did everything you could. I read the notes. I know what her condition was when she arrived. I know the team did the full protocol. You didn't fail her." Her eyes filled immediately. She didn't try to wipe the tears away. "But I'm still hurt," I continued. "Not because you were the nurse on that shift, because you knew who I was and you still chose to keep it from me. For almost 2 months. That part I need you to understand is separate." She nodded, voice unsteady but clear. "I do understand. I decided for you what you could handle. I was scared you would only ever see me as part of the worst day of your life. I was wrong to take that choice away from you." We sat with that for a minute. No one rushed to fill the silence. "If we're going to keep going," I said, "I need the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "I'll give it to you," she answered. "Even when I'm terrified, you'll walk away." "I don't need perfect," I told her. "I need real." She reached across the table, stopped halfway like she wasn't sure she still had the right. I looked at her hand, then placed mine over it. She broke then, quietly, shoulders shaking while she tried to keep the sound small. I felt my own eyes burn. We didn't fix everything in that one conversation. We agreed to start again, slower this time, with one rule between us. No more silence when something mattered. The weeks that followed were uneven. Some days I would be fine, and then suddenly remember she had hidden something that big and go cold without meaning to. Some days she would look at me like she was already preparing for me to leave, but instead of pulling back, we started saying the hard things out loud. It was clumsy at first. It got easier. Kara stopped avoiding Jennifer's name. She asked about her sometimes, gentle questions that showed she wanted to know the woman, not just the loss. I stopped feeling like I was betraying Jennifer by letting myself be happy with someone else. Loving Kara didn't shrink what I had felt for my wife. It just proved that a heart that had been broken could still make room. One night, I brought out the small wooden box I kept in the back of my closet. Inside were a few things that had belonged to Jennifer. Our wedding photo, a scarf she had knitted that never quite came out even, a handful of old cards. Kara held the photo for a long time, tracing the edge with her thumb. "I wish I could have met her on a different day," she said. I understood what she meant. Me too. She started to cry again, softer this time. I pulled her against me and let her stay there. I wasn't trying to take away her guilt. I was just letting her know she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. 6 months later, I took her back to the water behind the Boston Harbor Hotel. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that turns everything gold for a little while before the cold settles in. Wind came off the harbor in steady gusts. She stood beside me in a coat that was too big for her, hands in her pockets, looking out at the city across the water. I didn't make a speech. I just told her the truth. "We didn't start clean," I said. "We started with a setup neither of us asked for, a secret that hurt, and a lot of fear on both sides. But you showed me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about having the courage to tell the truth and the courage to stay anyway. I want to keep choosing that with you. Every day." I took the small ring from my pocket. Nothing flashy, just a simple band I had picked out because it felt like something she could wear while doing the work she loved. She covered her mouth with both hands. I got down on one knee right there on the cold concrete with the wind pushing at us. "Kara Mitchell," I said. Will you marry me? She nodded before she could get the word out. Yes, God, yes. I stood up and slid the ring onto her finger. She kissed me with cold lips and warm hands, and we stayed there a long time, holding each other while the light faded over the water. We got married the following spring in Boston Public Garden. Small ceremony, family, a few friends from the station and the hospital, some early flowers starting to open. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at her standing there in a simple dress with the wind moving her hair and said what I needed her to hear. You were in the room on the worst day of my life before I even knew your name. You fought for Jennifer when I couldn't. Later, you stood in front of me when I was learning how to live again. Loving you doesn't make what I felt for her smaller. It just shows that a heart that broke once can still grow. Kara's voice shook but stayed steady. You taught me that the truth can cut, but silence cuts deeper. You taught me that forgiveness isn't erasing the past. It's choosing not to let the past destroy what comes next. I promise I will keep telling you the truth, even when I'm scared. After the ceremony, I watched her standing under the trees with sunlight on her face, talking to one of the nurses from her shift. I thought about Jennifer. The ache was still there, but it had changed shape. It didn't press on my ribs the way it used to. It sat beside me now, quieter, like something I could carry without it pulling me under. Kara didn't heal me by making me forget. She healed me by staying when the truth came out, by letting me remember out loud, and by walking forward with me anyway. We didn't have a perfect story. We had a true one. And sometimes that's the only kind worth keeping.